We are here in the book fair with Dilip Sinha sir himself with his lovely book Imperial Games in Tibet. So sir, welcome. How do you like it here?
Thank you. It's a wonderful atmosphere here, both in the stall of BooksWagon and also the publisher of the book, Pan Macmillan, and the whole atmosphere in the book fair. It's very encouraging to see all these youngsters, including kids, coming in such large numbers to this book fair. It's always very well for education in the country and for books in general.
So can you tell us a little about the book and how do you came up with the idea that you want to write this book?
This book is about Tibet, but it is not on Tibet. It's a big book about why Tibet is lost, is considered a lost country today, and why the whole world accepts that Tibet is a part of China, internationally as well as in India itself. So I wanted to, I always felt that Tibet, as we know, has always been historically our friendliest neighbor, our largest neighbor, and yet today it is under foreign occupation. The Dalai Lama and thousands of Tibetan refugees have taken shelter in India. They are spread all across the world. They have lost their country. And yet, while there is a lot of sympathy for the Tibetans as a community, as a people, there is not enough political support for them. Like, nobody considers them to be a country under foreign occupation or a disputed territory. So I felt, why is this so? So I started going into the history of the 19th century to understand what were the imperial powers doing in this area. And it is, since I've been in service, in diplomacy, I had some idea of how imperial powers operate, how they try to dominate countries, and how in the 19th century they drew all the borders of countries. Some countries were declared independent, some countries lost their independence, some countries, all kinds of things happened. So in this whole scenario, what happened to Tibet? And that is what is in this book. And in this, it is the big powers, Britain, Russia, who decided between themselves what the fate of Tibet and some other countries in the region would be. And there we are. But it directly impacts us and our security, and also the fate of people who are so friendly to us as our neighbors.
Yeah. So what was the one main reason that totally changed Tibet's fate and suddenly China had this power and they just gain it? So yeah.
You see, China conquered Tibet around the same time as the British started conquering India, middle of the 18th century. Now, thereafter, Britain and Russia came into the scene 100 years later. Middle of the 19th century, Russia was entering Central Asia. Britain had conquered India and was trying to draw the borders of India. So, by this time, China had become a weak power. So, Britain and Russia, they had a rivalry between them, and they decided to settle their rivalry by dividing Central Asia into three parts. One part went to Britain, one part went to Russia, and one part was given to China. Or it was allowed to remain with China. Although China was very weak, it was in no position to control that, but they decided that it would remain with China. So this is how in the 19th century, early 20th century, this agreement came about between Britain and Russia that Tibet and Xinjiang would be allowed to remain a part of China. Mongolia, which is very similar, was taken over by Russia. So, fortunately for Mongolia, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Russian Empire collapsed, Mongolia became independent. When the British Empire collapsed, India became independent. But when the Chinese Empire collapsed, the British ensured that Tibet remained a part of China. And that is what this book is all about the British policy to ensure that Tibet did not become an independent country, because they were scared that if Tibet became independent, independent, then Russia would come and take it over, which they did not want. They did not want Russia on the borders of British India. So this was the great game that we all familiar with, but we rarely bring the great game into Tibet, and we rarely examine China's claim to Tibet. China, of course, claims that Tibet is a part of it since ancient times, which is nonsense, because in ancient times Tibet was an independent country. It had relations with India, it had relations with China, it had relations with Mongolia. So it was an independent country having relations. So this is what this book seeks to bring out, that here is this neighbor of ours which, because of certain developments in history, has now fallen in China's lap. China, of course, being an imperial power, it believes that it will not let go of Tibet. But no imperial power wants to let go of its colony. Even Britain let go of India only because it lost the Second World War. And then Portugal would not let go of Goa. The Dutch won't let go of Indonesia. The French won't let go of Vietnam. So all these imperial powers, they try to hold on to territory. It is for the people of the country to rise and for the international community to help them, which is what is not happening in the case of Tibet. And that is the tragedy of the people of Tibet, that while they are resisting Chinese rule, they don't get international support.
Okay, so one more thing that, many refugees like Dalai Lama came to India. What makes refugees first choice India as, as a national?
That's very interesting. It's a very good question.
Yeah.
You see, the Dalai Lama says today, whenever he goes to speak anywhere, he was speaking just about the other day in America, where he had gone for an operation, and he told the American people that, look, what I am teaching here, what I am saying here, is all what my school of Buddhism learned from Nalanda, because it is from Nalanda that the Tibetans took their knowledge of Buddhism. In fact, the script of Tibetan was devised in Nalanda by Tibetan scholars who had come down. So the Dalai Lama himself says that he is actually an ambassador of Nalanda University. This is what he says. So this is the kind of closeness they have with India. They regard India as the land of the gods. Even today, the Dalai Lama goes to Bodh Gaya and spends time there. They say that their textbooks were translated from Sanskrit and from Pali by both Tibetan and Indian scholars. A number of ancient textbooks, manuscripts, which were, when India was invaded by foreign invaders, a number of their monks, even Indian monks, they took these textbooks to Tibet and they were preserved there. And then when Rahul Sankrityayan was one of the Indian Pandits who went to Tibet early in the 20th century, he got those many manuscripts from there, and these manuscripts are lying in Patna Museum.
Exactly, and he wrote so many travelogues about it as well.
Yes, exactly. So he wrote a lot of travelogues.
Yeah.
So the link between Tibet and India was very close till very recently. Because of the invasions, the links broke. And since India was, Buddhism came in a cloud in India, the Tibetans turned towards the north. So they first turned towards Mongolia, had good relations with them, then they turned towards China, especially when China was ruled by the Mongols. So, and then after independence, once India became independent, again they renewed their links with India. So the Dalai Lama visited India in 1956 for the 2500th Parinirvan Divas of Mahatma Buddha. He came to India. So for him, and he stayed several months in India. So for Tibet, India has always been the friendliest neighbor, a country to come to both for study purposes and very often for asylum purposes. Even the 13th Dalai Lama, the Dalai Lama before the current Dalai Lama, when China attacked in 1910, he fled to India. So that was a kind of closeness that they feel towards India, and which is how they have settled down in India. And you never hear of any problems that we face with the Tibetan refugees and asylum seekers. They are part of our society. They are intermingled with us. Other countries talk about problems with asylum seekers and with refugees. We don't talk about problems with Tibetan refugees. That's the kind of close relations we have between our two countries.
Okay, so my last question would be about that China possesses a lot of power. Since they are very afraid that who will succeed as the next Dalai Lama. So what is the one thing that they are really afraid of?
Well, China is really afraid of the fact that it has not been able to win the hearts and minds of the people of Tibet. Despite ruling over Tibet for a long time, the Tibetans don't feel that they are Chinese, and the Chinese don't treat the Tibetans as equal. So the Tibetans resist Chinese rule, and that is the biggest problem with them. The Chinese are not able to understand what holds Tibet to its culture, to its language, to its religion, and they think that if once the Dalai Lama passes away, if they appoint their own Dalai Lama, then they'll be able to control. But that's not going to happen, because the Tibetan people realize that the institution of the Dalai Lama is a very holy institution, and they believe in the schools of Buddhism that are there, many of whom have come abroad, come to India and taken shelter in other countries. And it is to these schools of Buddhism that the Tibetans look to for their spiritual guidance, not towards the Chinese government. So China realizes this, and that is why it gets annoyed every time the Dalai Lama or any other Lama or any other Tibetan leader in exile makes any kind of statement about the rights of the Tibetan people.
Great. So lastly, I would request you to please give a shout out to BooksWagon as well.
Sorry?
If you could give a shout out to BooksWagon as well. BooksWagon, our e-commerce website.
Yeah, the BooksWagon is a very enterprising venture, and some young Indians have started this venture, which is a very creditable thing, and it's an Indian venture. So we are extremely happy that BooksWagon has taken on the idea of not only promoting books by Indians, but books for Indians. So a lot of foreign books also coming in. It's a very big website, and I hope Indian readers will turn towards this new online book selling portal and use it for the very vast repertoire of and reservoir of books that it has.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much, sir.
Thank you.
So if you haven't yet checked out Dilip sir's brilliant book,
this is the
Imperial
book.
Games in Tibet, do check it out on our website, BooksWagon.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you.